these guys were cooking away with their own band. I think they were called the Skulls at that point.
Yeah, we played, I think, about a half dozen shows in town.
Yeah, we were getting a pretty ugly following there for a while.
Yeah. And then we started reading about the scene in Toronto. It's like the Diodes and the Ugly and the Vile Tones all play at this really cool place called the Crash and Burn. So then we got a drive-through motorhome to drive from Vancouver. We decided we were going to go to England, the Skulls, right? And Gerry came with us, and my first wife did as well. So 6 of us went in this motorhome all in the start of the winter from Vancouver to Toronto, right? And it was just hellacious. And we got to Toronto, it was even more hellacious, and we relocated the Skulls there.
It wasn't just the Crash and Burn we had been hearing about. There was like 6 clubs to play at.
It was unbelievable. This punk rock scene was the greatest.
You know, that's what you get for reading too much media. But anyway, so we thought, well, yeah, okay, well, this is going to be no problem. This is going to be our livelihood. This is what we're going to do for the rest of our lives. We're just going to play music in Toronto. And when we got there, Crash and Burn had closed.
Yeah. Months before.
Months before we hadn't got the message.
We were a little behind the
news hadn't filtered back to
There's no email in those days, right? You know.
And so the only 2 places that were going was there was one club called David's, which was a gay club, but occasionally had punk rock shows there. And then the other one was barely a club. I mean, you could barely call it a club, and that was the Shock Theater, which had a show once a month or something like that, maybe.
We played there open for the Misfits one time.
Right, and it was a theater with seats in it too, so it was totally bizarre playing there.
Yeah, 30 people at that show.
So it was like pretty dismal right off the bat. We once again arrived totally poor, just like we had up in Lumbee.
Same deal.
And this time we couldn't even afford a fridge.
Gerry had written like "Slave to My Dick" and "Fuck You," and but he didn't have a band, but he had his bass. So we said, okay, let's form a band. And it was like Wimpy and the Bloated Cows. So I drummed. Gerry played bass.
My singing debut.
And Wimpy was singing, right? So it's almost like the forerunner of the Subhumans, but not quite, right? You know, wrong personnel, especially with me on drums.
It's where Brian really got his start as being a punk rock singer. And part of the reason why you put Wimpy and the Bloated Cows together too was, and this was also the origin of fuck bands, right? The name. You know, yeah, is because we couldn't get anybody to open for the Skulls, right? Because there were not that many bands in Toronto, and anyways, they hated us, right?
So we put up all these posters around town. The Shock Theater was like the Skulls.
I still have that poster.
And then with special guests from, we bullshit said from London, Wimpy and the Bloated Cows. We thought, okay, people wouldn't know them. They were only Torontonians. We should be able to follow them, right? And then so the guy who ran the Shock Theater, I forget his name, he phoned up and went like, hey Joe, there's no show. I go, what are you talking about, right? And he goes like, well, what's this like Wimpy and the Bloated Cows from London? It's just you guys with your band, right? I go, oh, well, nobody will know. What's the problem, right?
Joe and those guys that took off to Toronto and left us all alone to fend for ourselves. So we did. We started drinking and partying and playing guitars the way we wanted to, which was basically the same way.
Here's where the supreme screw-up happened, is that we were all supposed to move over to London, right? Toronto was like stopping off point. It gets partway there. And so Simon Werner and Brian went to London. And so then Dimwit and I, being their members of the Skulls, we were supposed to join them. And I don't know how or why this happened, but all of a sudden me and Dimwit decided, let's go back to Vancouver. So then Simon and Brian were like stuck wholly and high and dry without half the band, and broke and freezing, living in some squat in Brixton. And
I was even colder than Toronto.
Yeah.
And I was like drinking all the way across the Atlantic, kind of like swearing and cursing the whole way. Then when we landed, this guy turns around and goes,
well, you said Gatwick. It was I heard the story.
Gat shit.
Gatwick Airport, and Brian called, what is this, gat shit? The guy went foul-mouthed yank.